All right, let's get drawing. So we are going to start off by making a circle. And if you think, oh, I can't draw a perfect circle, totally okay. Make sure your lines are light, and you're just going to start by drawing a circle and then just keep going. Just keep drawing circles. Circle, circle, circle. And as you do it, you'll find that, see how my outside line, I can kind of get a circle shape about that. And don't worry if it's not a perfect circle, because line heads come in all different shapes and sizes. I'm just erasing the extra lines that were inside my circle. So now that we have that, we are going to make some lines through our circle. Remember to make these lightly. I'm going to make my first line about 1/4 of the way up from the bottom. See how it's about 1/4? And I'm also going to make a line right through the middle. If you want to make your middle line first and then do your quarter line, that's fine too. And then we are going to make kind of that snout area of our lion. So we're going to start by making 2 circles that are around the same size, and they kind of fit on the top of that big giant circle that we made. Okay, and the top line is on there. Then we're going to make a curve for the end of the mouth. I kind of made mine a little bit more squarish, but you can make it totally round if you want. And now I'm just coming in here and erasing any lines inside my 2 little circles that I made. So I'm just erasing those right out. And then what I'm going to do is I am going to make a shape on the outside of these circles. It's just a slanted line. That's all we're going to do. A slanted line that's going up towards the middle line. See that? Just up towards that middle line. And we are not going to make these connect, so just be careful of that. Don't make a full triangle. We're just slanting those lines towards that middle line. Just like that. When you get to that middle line, go ahead and stop, because now we're going to curve that line back out towards the side of the lion's face. And this is going to be where our eyes are. So they don't need to be super huge. We're just curving that line back out toward the side of his face. And if you notice, this kind of makes an S shape if you connect it all the way down with that line down there. See how it kind of makes an S shape? And then that's just kind of a backwards one over there. And now we're going to come in not on the very edge, but a little bit in from the edge. We are going to make our ovals for the eyes, and see how they come. They're kind of big. They come a little bit past that middle line, and they connect back about to where we started curving. I'm going to do the same thing on both sides. Now, if you are having trouble with this, it's totally okay. You can always erase. You can come back if you're too frustrated. Or if you want to be super silly, you can just give him sunglasses and not worry about his eyeballs. Alright, we're going to come up here and make the ears. They are half circles up on the top of his head. They're kind of right above his eyes. And don't worry if your half circles are not the same. Look, mine aren't even the same size. And remember, don't get frustrated. Pause the video if at any point I'm going too fast, or if you need to take a break, you can always pause at each step. Now, we're going to go into the nose, and see these dots right here that I put up there? We're going to make a little line right about there, a little bit past the middle of each of those little mini circles. And all I'm going to do is from these lines, I am literally just going to follow that circle we made. Look, I'm just following the circle that we've already made. See that? Just following the circle down. And when I get about a little bit before the middle, I am going to connect them. I'm just going to connect them with a straight line. Nothing fancy, just a straight line. Then I'm going to come up here. You can do a straight line for this. I like to do just a little bit of a dip in my nose because I think it looks really cute. And you know what? You can always erase. Erasing is always an option. See, I didn't like how I did that, so I erased it and made it again. So now we have our nose. And all I'm doing now, you guys, is just outlining those circles. That's it. Just outlining those circles a little bit. Okay, we are now going to come in and just erase those lines. Remember how I said to make them light? We're just erasing those guidelines that we made for ourselves. The one at the half and at the quarter. We're just erasing those lines. I'm just erasing them right off. Okay. And now what we're going to do is we're going to fill in the eye. We're basically going to make 2 more circles. I'm going to make kind of a bigger circle inside the eye. See that? To kind of give it, and then a little circle that's kind of in the middle. So big circle inside, and then another little one just about in the middle. And now that we have the eyes done, we're going to come up and make the lion's mane. Now I'm just doing back and forth movements, out, back, out, back. See that? Just that zigzaggy motion. And that's all I'm going to do. I'm going to make this zigzaggy motion. Now this is just a guideline for our lion that we're going to be watercoloring in just a few minutes. So don't worry if it's not exactly perfect. You can always erase. I went down here and made kind of more of a point down at the bottom because I want to connect it. Kind of almost like a heart kind of shape. And then we're going to come back up to the top. And we're going to do the exact same thing. Out, back, out, back. The only thing, just make sure that your points are going the direction you want his mane to go. So those points are just going to keep going all the way down so you can connect them down here. Now I'm going to add a little bit of fur to his ears. So we're just going to make that same motion. Out, back, out, back, out, back. Same thing, pointing those motions down. And now I'm just going to erase that line where the ear is connected to the head, and we are ready to get started painting. The Crayola tutorial starts at 39 minutes 54 seconds. Okay, let's get painting. Get your paintbrush out, and you need something to activate your paints with. You don't have to have a spray bottle. I like to use a spray bottle to get my paints nice and ready to use, but you can also just dip your paintbrush in the water and then just drop little droplets of water onto your paints to activate them. Now I'm going to go ahead and mix up a giant puddle of my lightest yellow. This particular yellow is called lemon yellow, but on your paints, just look for the lightest yellow that you have and go ahead and mix up a giant puddle of it. Just keep mixing, mixing, mixing until you have a nice puddle. And then I'm just going to fill in the entire lion's face with this color. I'm going to go over the whole thing. I'm just painting, adding this, keep going. And there was some leftover paint in my palette that kind of got mixed with my yellow, which is why it's a little darker here. But I'm going to keep putting some more yellow in. And I'm just bringing that lemon yellow. It's just a nice bright yellow, your brightest yellow that you have. And I'm going to come all the way down to the nose. I'm not going to paint over the nose, though. I'm going to leave that for pink. But see how I am filling in this lion's whole face with that nice yellow. Now, when we come down here to kind of his snout area, we're going to leave some of it white. So see how I left some circles white down there? And then we're going to color in the ears with the same color. The biggest part of watercolor is layering, and you always want to start with the lightest color. So that's why we started with such a light color on our lion. Now I'm going to mix up this second color, and it's basically like a really light orange. It's actually a cadmium yellow, but anything you have on your palette that looks like a light orange, you're going to use that. And we are going to come in and start adding some shadows to our lion. So I'm outlining the left side of his face, and then I'm just blending that out with my water. I'm just taking my water. All I'm using is water. I'm just blending it out, bringing it underneath his eye. See that? Just bringing it up past the ear. I'm just blending those colors out. See that? Now I'm just rinsing my brush out. I'm going to come in with some more color. I'm going to do the same thing on this other side. And see how some of it's still wet from before? This side we can have a little bit darker since the light's going to be coming from the left side. So if this side's a little bit darker, that's actually good, as it'll be kind of the shadow side. So now I'm just using water to spread it out. So just use your water to spread it out and kind of blend it. Then we're going to use that same color, and we're going to start, and we're going to actually make a V shape. See that? How we're going around making this nice V shape. And then it just comes down, almost like a little funnel. And then we're just blending. I'm just using water right now. I'm just using that to blend. A great way to pick up paint is to dry off your brush and then just sweep it by your paints if you got too much on there. Right now I'm just mixing up more of that orangey color. And I'm going to start adding in some of the mane with this color. This is kind of going to be the lightest shade of our mane, so that's why I want to start with it. We're going to avoid those little white tufts that we made at his ears earlier in the drawing stage. We're going to go around those and see, I'm just pulling the color out. I put a lot of color there and then I just pull it out. See how I just make strokes? So see, I'm filling it in and then I'm just pulling it out. Pulling it out. And they don't need to be the same size or length. In fact, we want it to be a little bit different to kind of show the fur and texture of our lion. See, I'm dabbing and I'm pulling. See, I'm just going in or going out. Just quick movements. Don't worry about them too much. They're just quick. And this will give your lion just that fun fur texture. And I'm just going around his ears. Try not to get it on his ears. But if you get a little bit, that's okay. Don't even worry. I'm just going to keep using this color all the way around his head here. The top part. And see, I'm just going up, down, up, down, up, down. See that movement? Up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down. Just like that. I'm blending here. I dipped it in water and a little bit more of the paint. And I'm just dragging my paintbrush. Just almost making lines. Just dragging, pushing it out. Some more of that color, kind of mix with that extra paint. I'll fix that in a minute in my palette, but that's why it ended up being a little darker there. You're going to keep going with those lines. See how I'm just pushing it out? Now, if you happen to make a mistake, I want you to watch what I do right here. I accidentally go over that white tuft. See, I went right over the white tuft that we wanted to keep. If that happens to you, this is a light enough color that you should be able to get rid of most of it. You can take a paper towel, a tissue, and you're going to just dab it right on there. Say, just push nice and hard, and it absorbed it. And if it didn't get all of it, add some more water to it. See, I'm just adding water. Now watch this. I just take my paper towel, my tissue, and I just soak it right up. See that? And I got rid of most of that color, kind of like an eraser. Just like that. I'm just doing it one more time. Just like that. Now I have pretty much my white back. And then I'm going to keep spreading this color out. This is a lot of what we're doing in this lion because we're making his mane. A lot of these motions are going to be the same. So just keep practicing as you go. I'm adding color and then you see I'm just pulling it out. Adding the color, pulling it out. And all of my lines are not exactly the same. I'm making them quick. That's a really important thing. Don't try to concentrate super hard on each individual stroke. Just have fun. Now I want some brown to mix so I can get a little bit of a darker color. I'm going to mix it with my orangey color. See, so I mixed that brown and that orange to make just a little bit of a darker shade, but not a super dark brown. And I'm going to come in here because remember this is the shadow side. And I'm going to add it in here and then I'm just going to pull it out. And see, since the paper is still a little bit wet from that straight orange that we applied, it's kind of blending in and that's a good thing. If yours isn't totally blending in, that's okay because we will be coming over it with more water later. But remember, you can always add water to help you blend. So if you're having trouble with the blending, just add a little bit more water. You don't want to soak your brush, but just get a little bit more on there. And we're going to keep going. Underneath, we have shadows, right? So anytime you're looking at an object and it has a shadow, it's going to be darker. So underneath the mouth is going to be our shadowy. So we're going to make it darker. We're going to make it we're going to add some more brown in there. And I'm just avoiding that mouth because we're going to leave that white. And I'm just bringing it down again. Once again, I'm just bringing those lines down. See, I'm mixing a little bit more of that lighter color in there. And that's the fun thing with watercolor. You can add different colors in to give it more variation, like your lights and your darks. And that'll really make it look like realistic fur. And I'm just adding some more. Adding more. Remember, the trick to watercoloring is layers. And you're going to add lots of layers on this guy. Okay, just rinsing off my brush. And now we're going to come back in and just keep going. Keep going. And feel free to pause the video. If I'm going too fast for you, just pause it, do the steps, and then keep going. I'm just still pushing that paint out. Just blending it right in. And look, he's already starting to look like a lion. Look at that. Now that the face is pretty much dry, I am going to add some, it's my red color, and it's an alizarin crimson, which is kind of almost like a pinky red. So if you have just a red, that works perfectly. If you have more of a pinkish shaded red, that would work awesome too. And if you have a pink color, you can use that as well. Whatever is in your palette. And I am just filling in those lines that we made for that nose. That's all I'm doing right now. I'm just filling in those lines. See that? And now, right now, I'm just using water to spread it around. We don't need a ton of paint. That's the fun thing about watercolor too. You don't need a ton of paint. And I'm just spreading this around. My paintbrush is pretty dry now, so I'm kind of picking up a little bit of the paint. You can see now I just added some water. And when you add water, it's going to dilute the paint and make it a little bit lighter. See how now that color is a little bit lighter? And now I'm going to come in and we are going to mix up a little bit more of our paint. We don't have black. Well, I don't have black. You might have black in your palette, but I don't. So I'm going to mix up brown and blue, and that's going to make a really nice black color that we can use. So let me just move this stuff out of the way. There we go. There, now my palette's sitting a little bit nicer. So I'm going to mix up, and I'm also going to clean out my palette because it was kind of messy. So I'm just cleaning it up. You can always do that. If you're ever having trouble with your colors mixing, just clean out your palette. No worries. Take a few minutes. Clean it right out. And now I'm going to come back in here and I am going to re-wet my paints because they're starting to dry out from originally when I wet them earlier. Okay, finally back to it. We're mixing up that brown, getting a nice big giant puddle of that brown. And then we're rinsing off our brush. We're going to go into that blue. It's just an ultramarine blue, which is just a dark blue. That's all it is. And we're going to mix it in with that brown. And look, now I have a black. So now I'm going to use this black. If you have a black in your paints, you can go ahead and use that. But this is just in case you don't. You can mix brown and blue. And we are just going to outline those circles that we made. Remember those circles? We're just outlining them. Just outlining those pencil marks just like that. And then we are going to blend them out with water. Just taking water on my brush, just going right back over that line. And now we're going to add our layers of shadow. We're going to start building up that color. I'm using yellow ochre, but if you don't have that, you can mix a little bit of yellow and brown to get a similar color. I'm just outlining the lion's snout with this color, and then I rinsed off my brush and I'm coming in with just water and blending it right out underneath the eye. And as you can see, I'm kind of making a triangle shape almost with a little bit of a curve to it. Comes all the way up to the tip of his eye. See that triangle shape? And then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. I let this one dry a little bit, so it was a little harder to blend it out, but that's okay. Just add a little water, keep going with it. There's that triangle shape again, right in there under the eyes. And then we are just going to go in and add a little bit more to all the different spots in the lion. Like I said, now we're adding those shadows. We want to outline those ears a little bit more. So we're adding some darker colors to outline it. We're avoiding those little tufts of white. We're going to keep going with that, just blending it out with your water so it doesn't look like we just drew a line there. And then we are going to now outline that fur in the middle of his forehead, going back into that kind of funnel shape. And then we are going to outline the bridge of the nose with just kind of that triangle shape that you saw. That little blue triangle. I'm just coming with that same color. I'm not using it super dark. I've kind of watered it down. And I'm just bringing it in to make the top of that nose a little bit darker so we can see that definition there. And now that my mane is dry, you can kind of feel it, make sure it's not super wet. We're going to add in a little bit of red. But this red over here is really bright, so I'm going to add a little bit of my yellow, my orangey yellow to it, to water it down a little bit and make it not quite so bright of a red. And I'm going to come in here and I'm just going to make quick strokes. That's kind of the key to making this fur. It's just quick strokes. Don't think too much about it. Just kind of up, down, quick strokes, just going in and out. And I'm sorry my camera is bouncing around just a little bit. I'm not exactly sure why it decided to do that. But I am just going in, out with those colors. I'm going to continue to do that around his mane. I'm going to add a little bit more color here, bringing it all the way down to his head. I'm going to keep pulling it out, just quick strokes out, quick little strokes. And I'm going to add a little bit of water and pick up some of the paint after I've patted my brush dry. And then we don't want to just add this red up on top. So I'm going to finish adding a little bit here, right on the top of his head. I'm going to bring it out a little bit, spread it around those same quick strokes. And then I'm going to come down to his right side and just add that red in there, so we're continuing that color through his mane, so it's not just on the top of his head. We're going to put it on the left side as well. I'm not going to do quite as much on this side just because it is the lighter side, but I'm just going to keep pulling that color out, adding in that reddish orangish color that we mixed up and pulling it out, just doing the same thing. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come with a little bit of black actually on the top of this lion's mane. Remember, you can mix brown and blue if you don't have black. But see, I'm just doing the tiniest little bit on the tips of this lion's mane on the top. And then I am pulling that color down. And as you can see, I'm also going up a little bit with it. Just be careful so that you don't go way crazy and go way up on the mane. Just do control your strokes a little bit when you're going up, but with the down, we're just pulling it right down towards it. See how I'm kind of going back and forth, really mixing it with that reddish color that we made, so it looks like he has variations of color in his mane, which is exactly what we want, because when you look at a lion, he's got variation. Now, we are going to come in with just our regular brown, your dark brown, and we are going to start defining more of that mane on the bottom. So we've defined some of it on the top, now we're doing the bottom. And some of my lines are thick, some of them are thin going down, as you can see. And I'm going to bring all these lines at the bottom of his mouth, down towards the bottom end of his mane. I'm going to bring them all kind of to this one point down the middle. It doesn't have to be exactly perfect. You can always change it. And it also doesn't have to follow your sketch exactly either. I'm using my sketch to help me, but I'm not doing it exactly as how I've sketched it out. I'm just kind of putting in these shapes, and if I like what they look like, I just leave them. I'm like, okay, that looks like a cool shape. And I'm just pulling them out. That's kind of the fun thing with watercolor, is that sometimes it does its own thing, and it's really cool to watch and see. And you can watch just the magic happen under your fingertips. It's really fun. So I just added those dark shades underneath his chin. And now we are going to go in with a little bit of our brown and yellow ochre mixture. So it's just a little bit of a darker color than that yellow, but lighter than our brown, kind of in between there. And we're going to start adding a little more shading to the rest of his mane. See that out by the ear? I'm doing those same strokes. You're going to do a lot of that. Out, back, out, back. Same thing over here by this ear. I'm like, I think I need a little bit more of his mane on this side to make it look a little more even. And as you go, you can always pause, step back, and take a look at it. Sometimes I even find what really helps me when I am painting is to take a picture of it with my phone and then look at that picture. And sometimes it actually helps me to say, oh, well, I think I need to add a little bit more on this side, or maybe I need to add a little bit more of the brown under here, or some of that yellow over here. So that's another tip that sometimes helps me if I'm just having a hard time seeing how my painting is looking. And I just added some red underneath here, a red color that we mixed up, and I'm adding it over here on the right side, pulling it out. Just like we've been doing, adding water. If you ever see my brush go off and not dip in the paint and you see it go off screen, I'm always dipping it in the water and just taking the very, very wet drops off on my paper towel, but leaving the brush pretty wet. And as you can see, I'm doing the same thing. I'm just pulling it out, pulling those colors out after I put them on, because we want it to look nice and smooth. We don't want those edges to be super rough and like we just painted with a line and left it there. We want to blend them out and make them look kind of smooth. And it's time to add a little bit more detail to kind of the muzzle part of the lion. So I'm just taking that same kind of like brownish yellow and going in and leaving some white though. We don't want to fill in the whole thing. We're kind of doing almost like making a smaller circle inside. We're just going around the outside. So bring that color in, and then I'm just going to blend it out with just water. I dipped my brush in the water. I'm just going back over it so it doesn't look like a super harsh line there. And I'm dabbing my paintbrush off, and we are going to go into our black color. Now, I don't want a lot on my paintbrush because I'm just going in and adding a little bit of shadow to that bottom part of his mouth right there. And I'm just adding in little dabs here and there. We don't want to color the whole thing in. This is just shadows. And I'm going over it with water to kind of blend them out, make it look a little bit more like fur. And fur's not super, even in that sense of making all the lines perfectly the same. So you don't even have to worry. And I'm going to take my little tissue here, my little paper towel, and just dab it. Just dab it to pick up the extra water because I don't want it to be super dark. And then I'm just washing off my brush again. And that's a really important thing. Make sure you wash off your brush in between. Now, this part is a little bit tricky. So if you don't feel comfortable doing it with the watercolor, you can always do it with a micron pen or a Sharpie, something that's waterproof just so it won't bleed everywhere as you add more layers. But I'm just going in and I'm outlining the eye with that black color, and I'm kind of blending it out just like that. And I'm going to do the same thing to the other eye, and like I said, you can use a micron pen, you can use a Sharpie if you're not comfortable doing this with your watercolor brush, or maybe if it doesn't have a sharp enough point that you feel comfortable doing it. But I'm going to do the same thing to the other eye. I am just following those lines in pencil that we outlined when we drew the lion. I'm just going around the very outside, because if you look at pictures of lions, you'll see that their eyes are kind of surrounded by like this black line. But we don't want it to be too harsh, so we're just going to go in and blend it out just a little bit. See how my brush is much drier? I go in and I kind of pick up a little bit of that paint if I feel like I got too much in an area or at the tip of the eye where it meets the nose. And then I'm adding more of that yellow ochre. Like I said, again, kind of that brownish yellow, more on the yellow side. And I'm going to mix up a little bit of brown on my palette too. And I decided to use more of just the straight up brown rather than using both that and the yellow ochre. And I'm just going into, remember where we added that shadow before, I'm going over it with this brown. As you can see, it looks really dark, but don't worry because now we're just going in, and I took my brush, I rinsed it in the water, and then I'm just coming in with just water now. And I am patting off the excess water. Man, it's hard to say that word. And then just going back over with those back forth motions, up, down. See how it's just quick motions, out, back, out, back. I'm going to continue to blend that all the way around. And now as you can see, it kind of has that fur texture. I'm going to go under the eyes because those are some more areas for shadows. And since this is the shadow side, we're just going to go in straight with that brown. And I'm still blending it out, which means I'm just taking water and using it to kind of push that paint up. See that? And now because the paper is wet, when I add that paint, it blends out a little nicer. And then I just take my brush with no paint on it. I rinsed it off, dried off my brush, and just patted it on the paper towel. And I'm going to do more shadows on the other side, but I'm going to use that light yellow ochre color because it is the lighter side. And once again, I'm just kind of making that triangle shape. And I'm going to add in that yellow ochre here on the right side, just so that the transition between colors isn't so harsh. And I'm going to do the same thing on the left side over here, just a little bit lighter. And that's the fun part of watercolor, like I said before, is layering. Layers are so important when you're doing watercolor. And we're going to come and outline the ear. because the ear was kind of starting to disappear again. So we're just slowly adding up color on that as we go. Just giving it some touches of color. Now, the eyes on my line are dry. Make sure you wait until they're pretty dry. And I'm going to mix up a bright orange color again. And I'm going right into that eye. And I'm making a circle, okay? And this is why it's important that your black paint is dry. If you used a pen or a Sharpie, just make sure that it is all the way dry before you do this so that it doesn't bleed into your color. But we're just using that bright orange, and this is the eye. And once this dries, then we'll go in and add the black for the pupil. But while we wait for that, we are going to mix up a little bit more alizarin crimson, which is just that red. I'm mixing it with just a little bit of black to make it darker, but it's still kind of a reddish color. I know it looks kind of black on here, but it's a deep red. And then I rinse my brush out, and I'm just blending it right in, giving those nostrils just a little bit of a touch-up. And now we're going to go in and define those little white tufts of fur that we left white. See, I'm just going around the edges of it. It's almost just like outlining it. And then I take my wet brush and I kind of smooth it out like we said before, so there's not those harsh lines. Just kind of go back over it. Remember not to use too much water. You can always just tap your brush on the paper because you don't want all the water to be gone, but you don't want it to be soaking wet either. And then I'm just outlining, again, his mouth area with my black. And I'm going to blend it out again. I feel like that should be the theme, like everything I do. Blend, and then blend it out again. Now, it's important that you dry your brush off really well before this step. We are going to come in with our black, just getting the very, very tip of our brush wet. And we are going to start making those dots where the whiskers grow on his muzzle. And we're making them in rows that almost look like a U shape. They're not perfectly straight growing across his nose, and that gives just the illusion of a three-dimensional object rather than just something that's flat. So using those curved lines make it seem like that's actually a lion's snout rather than just a circle on the paper. If you want, you can always do this first with pencil. Sometimes I do that on my paintings. If I'm not sure if I'm going to like how I do something or not, I'll just go in with pencil because you can always erase pencil. And if you don't like it, erase it. And then when you're happy, then you can just go over it with your watercolor. Now you can do this with like a micron pen. I wouldn't recommend it with a Sharpie because you'll probably get dots that are a little bit too big, but you can do that. Just make sure that you don't hold your micron pen there that long so it gets to be bigger. We want them to be pretty light. And then I'm going to come in and we're just adding the black pupil to his eye. And do the same thing on the other side, and we'll add a little bit more details to his eyes later on. Just like that. I'm rinsing my brush off, and I'm just actually kind of moving the paint around, and I absorbed most of the paint because my paintbrush, I dried it off, and so it picked up the pigment of that paint, and so that's why it got lighter as I was putting my brush on it. And I'm going to let this dry, and I'll come back when it is. Alright, so I have let my lion dry. He's completely dry. And I've decided that I don't like how small his mane is down below his face, so we're going to make it a little bit bigger. And I'm going to come in with that yellow ochre again, and just pulling it out. And I'm going to add a little bit more water because I noticed, I don't have enough water in my brush. That's another great tip. If you're struggling with your paint not spreading very well, you might just need to add a little bit more water. And don't worry too much about using a ton of paint. A lot of times I'm using very little pigment and I'm just spreading it out with the water. So see how I'm kind of just filling out his mane on the bottom there. Wanted it to be a little bit bigger and poofier. And then I'm going to go in and add some more shadows on this side. I'm going back into that red color that we need. It's basically just a watered down red. You can add a little bit of brown to it if you want to give it that dark feel. And I'm going to add in some brown to that color. So it's kind of a reddish brown now. Mostly brown though. And I'm going to come over here on the shadow side and add a little bit more layering to give it more definition. And I'm just pulling the hair out again. I'm just going from the face out, from the face out. When you do this, you want to go from the face out rather than towards the face, because the hair's not going toward the face, the hair's going out, right? The mane is going out away from him, so you want to pull away from the face. Adding a little bit more shadow to this side, because even when something is the light side, it still has shadows in it. They're just not as dark. And I'm going to mix up some of my bright red, my cadmium red, and my yellow ochre again. So basically just a red and a little bit of yellow to make it not quite as bright. And I'm coming up here because I noticed when my paint dried, as you probably did, that I lost some of the definition and some of the vibrancy. That's another thing about watercolor. It always dries lighter than how you put it on the paper. And so that's another thing to keep in mind too. If you go in with a color and you think, oh my goodness, I've ruined it, it's too dark, I think it's going to look terrible, wait for it to dry, because it will always dry lighter. And most often when I think something is too dark and I pick up a lot of the pigment with, my dry brush, a lot of times I'll come in later and go, oh, actually now it's too light and I need to add more color. So experiment with that. It's a super fun thing about watercolor. And now I'm going back in and I'm adding a little bit more black to the pupils of my lion, making them nice and dark. And I'm just kind of making them a little bit bigger. Spreading that watercolor around. And then I'm not adding straight black. This is very watered down black, almost a gray. I'm just adding it around the eye that we made. That's why it's so important that the eye is dry. And then I'm also outlining the eye again with my black. Because like I said, remember when I first did this, you probably saw it and were like, wow, that's so dark, and see how light it dried. So now I'm just adding a little bit more in, and then I'm just blending out that little spot that I made right there towards his nose. You can also do it with a micron pen. You can do it with a Sharpie. Again, if you don't feel comfortable doing it with your watercolor brush. And I'm just adding a little bit more around those eyes again. I'm filling it in with just a little bit of that watered down black, so more of a gray color. And then I'm adding more pigment to around the eye. I'm just outlining it again because I want it to be darker. And then if you look now, it's a little bit darker than the right side, so I went in and just kind of blended it out. And then I went back in to the other side and I started adding some fur to the ears, and this is just that red color again. I'm going in, I'm adding some fur, making it look like, his ear is actually part of his head. Adding more color around him. And really at this point, you guys, it's up to you to decide if you want to go in with more and more layers, because that's the fun thing about watercolor. You can add as many layers as you want. You can make that mane as dark as you want, as light as you want. I'm going to go ahead and stop here because I'm pretty satisfied with how my lion looks. But like I said, you can go in, add more layers, and you're really done. Now, the other thing that I don't want you to forget is to sign your work. And I use a micron pen because I like it being small, but you don't have to. You can you can use any pen. If you're not going to add anything else, you can use whatever you have on hand. But if you might go in later and put some more watercolor, make sure it's like an alcohol-based marker so it's not going to blend with any water that you add. All right, let's get into our Crayola tutorial. This was extremely fun, you guys, and I just want to say, have fun with this. Don't get too frustrated if it doesn't turn out exactly as you were hoping. Just have fun with it anyway, and just see what happens, and you can always do it a bunch of times. I'm just using black, yellow, brown, red, orange, and pink. 6 colors, that's it. And this is, I sketched out the line again, just like in the tutorial that we did. And I'm going to go in and literally color the entire lion's face with this yellow. That's literally what you're going to see me do. And I'll just let you watch me rather than listen to me talk a whole bunch. But I'm just going in and filling in his entire face. The only areas that I am avoiding are his eyes and his nose, and then also the chin area underneath his face, because that part we're going to leave white. Now granted, if you accidentally fill this in, that's fine. Every lion is different. Every lion has a different face, just like you and I are all different. Lions are different too, so don't worry. It's not a big deal, but I'm going to leave mine white. I'm not filling in his entire muzzle area. I am leaving kind of a circle of whiteness there on each side. Now that I have that, the whole face is colored in with that yellow, I am going to go in with the orange, as this is kind of the next darkest color, and I'm going to add basically a V shape. So I'm going in, and as you can see, I'm kind of making quick up and down movements with the marker to kind of give it like a fur feel to it. It's like a V with a line going down. And now I'm going to start adding in the mane with this orange color. I'm going back, forth, basically a pointy zigzag, just back, forth, back, forth, back, forth. I am being a little bit precise with making sure I'm trying not to go on his face that I've already done, but if you get a little bit, it's not a big deal. And I am going around those white tufts that we want to keep white. But now I'm just doing those same movements, out, back, and really that's a lot of what I'm going to be doing for this part. Just zigzag, out, back, out, back, out, back. Just like that. And the next color I'm going to use is brown because that's the next darkest color. And I'm going to use the brown. Oh, this brown is pretty much out. I'm going to trade it out for a different one that I have. Grab it just a second. Okay, way better. Sometimes that happens. No worries. And then I'm going to make that underneath his chin. So I'm avoiding the chin area again with this part, but I'm using the brown under here because this is the shadow part of his mane underneath his chin, and I want it to be darker. And then I'm going up on top, and I'm doing the same thing with the brown, just going up, down, making that zigzag above the orange that we did. And then I'm actually going to go back in with the yellow because with the water, we're going to be blending this out and blending it together, and we want to have these colors just blending so it doesn't look like just one color. We want to have a variation of color in there, and it'll mix and look really cool. And so I'm doing the same thing on this side, just adding yellow to the outside layer. Right around it, coming all the way down. And I'm going to add a little bit of shadow under here, so I'm just making some lines. I'm outlining the basically the nose area where the muzzle is with brown on the right and with orange on the left. See those little lines I made? And then I'm going to fill in his nose, his cute little nose. I'm going to use pink. Now, you could use red if you wanted to. I'm just using pink though, so that's up to you. Okay, you guys, let's get to the most coolest part of this entire thing. After I add like 2 more things with markers, because I realized that the ears needed just a tiny bit more of definition. Okay, now get your watercolor, or not your watercolor, your brush out, and we are going to add water to this and make it look like watercolor. Alright, so you're just going to go in and basically activate all your marker, kind of like how you activate watercolor paint. And see how I'm just going underneath the eye, and I'm kind of making this triangle shape with it. See how I'm just going underneath the eye and then kind of down to a point. Just like that. Just blending that marker out. I'm going to do the same thing in the middle here where I put those orange lines. Now, one thing about markers is you might have some of those lines left over from what you put on originally. See how you can still kind of see the original marks that I made? And that's okay because it's going to give your lion some personality and it's going to look like real fur. So don't worry, don't be frustrated if not all your lines go away. It's totally okay. I'm just doing this, basically the same movement I did with the marker, but now I'm doing it with my brush going out, back, out, back, out, back. And now I'm blending out that brown. See how my brown, I can still see some of the lines that I made, and that's okay. It's the shadow under there, totally fine. This one I'm kind of filling in a lot more than just that tiny triangle. I'm kind of going all the way up with that color. All the way around. Now I'm just basically activating that yellow paint. Well, not paint. I keep calling it paint. Oh my goodness, it reacts just like paint. Blending out the markers. Just activating the yellow. And then I'm coming in here and first I'm going just straight up and down with it to just get it starting to flow. And then I'm pulling it out. See, I'm pulling away from the lion's face. I'm pulling out rather than towards his face because we want our strokes to go in the direction of his mane. And if we're going towards his face, well, his mane's not going towards his face, right? So think about it going away. And once again, I'm going in here and I'm first kind of wetting the paint and then I'm pulling it out away from the face, pulling out away from the face. And doing those zigzaggy motions again. Activating the paint, avoiding that bottom chin area. Pulling it out. This part is so fun, you guys. One tip that I will give you is don't get super caught up in really fancy detail at this point. Really just start pulling your paint out. Do quick movements because this is going to give you the most kind of authentic type of look rather than, you know, super slowly going out and trying to define each and every little bit of mane. Don't worry about that. Just start pulling out. See how, like, this is real time. I'm just pulling it right out. Doop, 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 doop. Just like that. I'm not worrying about making it super, you know, detailed and defined. I noticed there was a lot of color in one area, so I'm just spreading it around with my water. Kind of outlining his face again. Bringing that color down. I'm like, oh, I want it to come down here a little bit more, and I want it to be on that side a little bit more. And then I just use more water. And I start by activating the orange on the side of his face. Yeah, I just go up and down to kind of get it wet with that water. And then I pull it out again. I'm just pulling out, bring it all the way down to that brown that we've already kind of pulled down. See how I'm going out, 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 out with my brush. A little bit more over there. I'm just filling out his mane. See that I'm not adding any more color. I'm just using the water to spread it out a little bit more. Because I'm like, I want his mane to be a little fuller down here. So I am bringing it down. And I'm doing the same thing up on top. And now with this stuff on top, this orange and brown color, I'm doing the zigzaggy motion again. Zigzaggy, zigzaggy, zigzaggy. And I'm not even caring that I'm mixing the two colors. Look at that. I'm just going to keep going. And what that will do is blend them. And it'll look really cool. So I'm going up, down with that same zigzaggy motion. Up and down and up and down. And I'm pulling it down. See, this time I'm actually pulling it down because I want those colors to blend. I want it to look like his mane has those two colors intertwined. And I don't want them to just be, oh, look, there's orange and now there's brown. I want them to mix. And I'm just outlining his ear. Doing the same thing on the other side. And look at this, you guys. It looks like a watercolor painting. It's so cool. I love Crayola markers. So fun. I'm pulling it out again. And you can just watch on your picture. You really get to decide what your mane looks like. The mane that we drew earlier is really just a guideline. You do not have to make it look exactly like that guideline. I'm kind of going off and doing a little bit of my own thing. And now I'm just getting the pink marker wet and spreading it around where his nose is. And now I'm going in with my black, guys. And I am going to outline his muzzle. See that? Boom. Ta-da! Easy peasy lemon squeezy. Now this part I am outlining his eye. Just do the best you can. Don't worry too much about it if you mess up a little bit. It's alright. Do the best you can. I'm just outlining it with my marker. Outlining just like that. See how my eyes aren't even the same shape exactly? Don't worry about it too much if, you think, oh, my eyes are terrible. Just keep going. Have fun with this picture. And I'm putting in yellow because if you look at pictures of lions' eyes, they kind of have like this yellow, orangish color to them. And since I want mine to be more on the lighter side, I'm just going to use that yellow. And then I'm going to come in and add the black pupils right there. I'm adding them kind of in the middle and almost, they're touching the top of his eyelids. Just like that. So he kind of looks like he's looking at us. And I'm also going to go in here, and if you notice, see how I'm curving? I'm adding the dots where his whiskers will be. And so see how I'm curving my dots? We don't want to make them just straight across. We want to give that three-dimensional feel to our lion. So by curving it, it looks like, oh, his muzzle is round rather than just flat. So I'm just making rows of dots. You can actually go in and do this with pencil first if you're nervous that you're not going to make straight lines, and then you can go over it with your marker. I added a little bit of black to the nose to give it a little bit more definition. And then I'm going to come in with my water, just water, and I'm not going to put a lot on, you guys, just a little bit to kind of get it to not be so harsh. And then I'm going to take my paper towel or tissue, whatever you have, and just dab, not scrub, just push and bring off to make sure it doesn't bleed too much into that nose and make the whole nose black. And then I really wanted to add some more definition to the sides of my lion's face, and so I picked up just my brown, and I went on the left and the right and defined that. And then I came in with my watercolor brush, and I blended it right out. And as you can see, this one didn't spread as much as when we first did it, and that's okay as long as you kind of activate it because it really frames his face and makes it stand out a little bit more, and that's what we want. We want to be able to see his majestic face peeking at us. Now I am going to blend a little bit. This is a little scary. If you want to skip this part, go for it. I'm just adding a tiny bit, not a lot, a tiny bit of water to kind of the corners and edges of his black eyes to kind of make them blend a little bit better with his face. And then I'm just going over this with water. I'm going to take my orange and I'm going to make a triangle. See, I'm making this triangle where it kind of meets at the corners of his nose just like that. And I'm not coloring it all in because I don't want it to be super dark, but now I'm going to take my water and I'm going to spread that out, and it gives definition to the nose, so now it looks like, oh, our nose is popping out. It's a really fun and easy way to add a little bit more detail to your lion. And I noticed it was a little wet over there, so I just dabbed it with my paper towel. And you can do that in any area you feel is too wet, or you think, oh no, my colors, they're bleeding too much into each other, they're blending, oh no. You can pick it up with a paper towel. And then I'm just giving him kind of that eyebrow tuft almost of fur, and I'm just blending it right out with that water. That's all I'm doing, just adding that water to it. Fun little last step for character. And now we're going to add a little bit of fur in his ears. And I'm using my brown. You actually can use orange if you want to, but I use brown because I hadn't used it a ton in his face, and so I knew that that would really stand out. So I just filled in his ear basically with that color. And see how I made it kind of, I made the lines with more fur strokes, just that little zigzaggy, because we might not be able to blend all of those lines out with the water, and so we want to make them look at least a little bit like fur. You can still see the ears up there. Just drying off my brush. And you guys, that's really it. You don't forget to sign your masterpiece with your name. I always sign mine Ruthie Elizabeth and put the date on it so you know when you made it. And you are done. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial and I hope it inspired you to be creative and have fun. I'll see you in the next tutorial. Bye!